I can't remember exactly whether it was coming or going, but a few years back we flew to Seattle to visit with Adam's sister and her family. She has 2 young kids now. There was only one at the time that we went and visited. But I remember this trip, and this specific part of the trip was an interesting memory. I was waiting in line in the women's restroom at the airport, and it was a long line. You know how they get to be sometimes. And I was only a few from the head of the line. I wasn't too far back. And right at where the line started was kind of the changing station area also. And there was a mom there who had a young toddler up on the changing station and an infant in a, carrier seat down at her foot that she was trying to also keep an eye on. And toddlers, when they get to that age where they're still wearing diapers and yet are getting very difficult to manhandle, yeah, that's where she was. And I felt so bad for her. And the toddler was just hollering and screaming, and no matter what she said, just the little one continued to wail. Some of the women in the line behind me were saying, that wouldn't happen if it were my child. And, well, in my day, we would just smack them and, those kinds of things. And we're speaking unflatteringly. And I didn't like that, but I didn't do anything. I didn't turn around and be like, hey, stop being nasty, stranger in the restroom. I mean, that's kind of awkward. So I just was standing there in awkwardness. And this lady who had just come from washing her hands at the sink and goes by the changing station, slips into her purse, and out comes a mouse puppet on her finger. And she presents that to the little one, who is now very intrigued by this strange lady and the mouse puppet, and is not screaming. And she proceeds to play with her and entertain her and keep her busy until her mom has finished what needed to be finished. And then she smiled and walked away. And I thought I would bet money that is a Christian. Because being a Christian should look different. Being a Christian looks, acts, thinks differently than the rest of our world. We have been in this series, and today we conclude our worship series, Reckless Love, by Tom Berlin. We're at our very last Sunday, and the title of his concluding chapter is Emulate Christ. Emulate Christ. Kind of a good summary way of saying, just do what Jesus did. Love God, love your neighbor. And there are 2 scriptures that I want to lift up this morning that I believe are really tie all of this together. And we'll start with the one that comes from the Gospel according to John, chapter 12, beginning with verse 23. Jesus replied, he is replying to some Greeks or Gentiles who have come to see him. The time has come for the human one to be glorified. I assure you that unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it can only be a single seed. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Those who love their lives will lose them, and those who hate their lives in this world will keep them forever. And then similarly, but with a little different twist, let's look at Luke chapter 9, also verses 23 through 25. Jesus said to everyone, "All who want to come after me must say no to themselves, take up their cross daily, and follow me. All who want to save their lives will lose them, but all who lose their lives because of me will save them. What advantage do people have if they gain the whole world for themselves, yet perish or lose their lives?" Let us hear what the Spirit is saying to God's people. These two passages, and kind of in context of this whole study that we're wrapping up today, I think provide our conceptual framework for the way we construct and live and interpret our lives together and our lifetimes, our being here. The essential framework that is laid out here is that of death and resurrection. It's that whole event, or rather the movements in that event, that together make up a framework, a lens through which we can understand our own lives. What do I mean by that? Well, we all have seasons in our lives, whether something has happened to us externally or we are facing demons inside. Some of us have been there. When I say, have you been at the foot of the cross on Good Friday, when there is nowhere else to go? We have times of crucifixion in our lives, times of pain and separation and loneliness. Those are our crucifixion times. And then sometimes we're in the middle of a season or between seasons, and we can't quite figure out what is coming next. We don't have the full picture yet. And for me, that's Saturday. We know the pain. We've been there. We are grieving. But we also know that Sunday's coming. And so it's just a time of waiting. Waiting for Sunday. And then we all hopefully have times of resurrection. Seasons in our life where things come into place. Where we understand now in retrospect where God was working and how how God is using this, what we learned and experienced as Good Friday, as crucifixion, we now know is part of a greater whole. That is one way that we live that framework, that we interpret our lives as cycles of death and resurrection. And we find ourselves at various points at different points in that story. The unpleasant fact that I need to point out is that death is part of the process. And that's the part we don't care a lot for. We would like to skip straight to resurrection, right? We would like the pain to just go right along. We'd like to just not have to have it at all, actually, if we're just being perfectly honest. But death is part of the process. In fact, you can't get to resurrection without going through death. It's just the way it works. If you're going to have a resurrection, something has to die. So, using our framework again of cycles of death and resurrection in our lives, what needs to die? What needs to die are the things that are separating us, obstacles keeping us from being the people that God intended us to be. Sometimes those are the ways of the world that we have adopted, bad habits, shoulds that we learned as children in our families. All of those things that we take on that distract us or that try to tell us this is the way we're supposed to mold our lives. We're supposed to chase more money, power, success. Those are the things that need to die. Tom Berlin says it really well. He says, we die to our self-focused agendas, our bad habits, and our limiting preoccupations. We die to our obsession to be loved by everyone so that we can learn to offer love to anyone. See, there is both a death there, what needs to die, but also a reason that is resurrection. When we move into that understanding of our lives, what resurrection means, most often the way the word is used, we're talking about the resurrection, which can either mean Christ's resurrection from the dead, or the final resurrection when those who have died in the Lord are raised at the end of this time. But that's not the way Jesus uses it. As Jesus uses this concept anyway, he calls his disciples to live resurrected lives now. Jesus taught that eternal life is not something we just hope for in the future. It's here now. It's real. And we live that way now. Living resurrection. Living resurrection means knowing what needs to die, but also what needs to grow. When we die to self, as we put it sometimes, we might imagine that means we have to lose ourselves, our uniqueness, our identities, our personalities. But that's not the case. The die to self, the self that we die to, is the selfishness, is the part that claims, I am who I am because I said so. I made this creation. Dying to self means accepting that we did not make ourselves, that we are creation, that we were created by God, and that our journey, our resurrection life, is about learning to become the most us that we can be. The truest self that finds its identity in the image of God, not as our own ruler, but as one who is loved and worthy and precious because we were created by God. That is part of resurrection living. And the fundamental assumption there is that it should stand out in terms of when we are out in the world. Christian life should look different than the world. A lot of times we get bogged down and frustrated that not as many people are coming to our churches. Not as many young people are in our churches. And we say, why are those young people leaving? A better question would be why they don't even consider the possibility of going, but that's for another time. One of the reasons that younger people are leaving churches is not that they don't like Jesus. They think he's pretty great. What they're leaving is because the church doesn't look anything like Jesus to them. And I kind of understand their argument, where they're coming from. I mean, if you're told that being a Christian is a big deal, and yet you can't tell among your neighbors who are the Christians and who are not, then does going to church make any difference? It doesn't appear to. But that's what resurrected living does. That's what it should do, is transform and look differently. I think about the lady in the restroom with the mouse puppet, and about people who do love and kindness. Not just those like one-off, you're in the line at the Dairy Queen and the person ahead of you paid for your order, and so you go, okay, I'll pay for the person behind me, even though it was actually more than what you ordered, you're like, it's okay. I'm generous and kind today, and I'll do it. I mean, that's fine. That's great. But kindness as a lifestyle, the Christian resurrection lifestyle, is one that fully embodies that love of neighbor, even when it's inconvenient. And sometimes we get this misperception that not being kind involves some kind of malice or emotion, some negativity. Like it's only bad if we deliberately chose to do something unkind or wrong, or chose not to do something that we could have done. Kindness or unkindness can sometimes just be we didn't even notice the opportunity to do good, to share kindness, to be love, because we were so busy focusing on ourselves. We never even saw the opportunity to help someone in need. We never even noticed the person who was struggling, the one who needed a kind word. We didn't choose not to care about that person. We chose to think about us and not those around us. We chose not to be fully present in the world, and instead focused on our number one. So this Christian lifestyle, this resurrection living, is about those habits, those things that we do over and over again, the ways we interact with the world, the posture with which we come, being that of presence, mindfulness, attention to those around us, attentiveness to the situation, reading the room, and going toward the pain and suffering instead of avoiding like everyone else does. I wish I had a mouse puppet. I would carry it in my purse. I want to be like that, where every time I'm placed in a situation where there is suffering going on, I address it and I meet it. And not just give a smug to the lady behind me who was saying all the nasty things when the other lady left. Resurrection life is not easy, but, well, that's taking up your cross. But it's Jesus' life. It's who we follow. And it is transformative. When we say things like, Jesus died for our sins, sometimes it becomes so mundane, so ordinary, and we tend to reduce it to a transactional event. Like, Jesus did this, we received this benefit, we said we believe in you, therefore we got our ticket punched to heaven. And that empties that event of so much of what it means. Jesus wasn't going for a transaction, he was going for transformation. So when we live like ordinary, we're not living into what he wanted for us. He wanted transformation. So as we go and live this week, the hours that we are not in one another's presence and in worship and in study together, in those hours, don't be afraid of suffering. Don't be afraid of death. We know it leads to resurrection. And we know that that process is one of transformation. And we are called to be a part of it, to show other people how it's working in their lives and what Jesus' death means for them. And so I pray. If you do not have a church family, or if you don't have a place to call home, or perhaps if you have not yet dedicated your life to Christ, maybe you've been kind of following the leader, but, not where everyone else can see. Maybe it's time to take that step. However we can help you on your discipleship, on your journey of faith, if you want to know, I'm trying to figure out the next step, come to me. And let us be a part of that in your life. Let us now stand and sing. So as we go in peace and live like you're resurrected and part of the transformation. Let us go and do likewise.